Welcome to the EchoCast, episode 133. Oh no. This is a podcast about The Division, its community, news, speculation, and updates. I am Bon Diesel. I do some Division stuff, such as this podcast, Twitch streams, and YouTube videos. Please take a moment to subscribe and to rate the podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on. If it's on YouTube, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear from you. This episode, we will talk about the news that Massive is working on a Star Wars game and how that impacts some Division 2 and my Division 3 speculation. And that's it. That's what we're going to talk about. I want to thank our Patreon supporters for this month: Hassan, Christian, Darren, Tim, PK, Dale, and Ron. There are no more ads on this podcast, so if you want to support in some capacity, check out Patreon at patreon.com/bondiesel. If you want any extra bonuses or have any ideas, feel free to let me know, and I am happy to oblige. Typically right now, I would talk about the state of the game from today. Once again, there was not one, I assume because of the news that was coming out today. I'm going to jump straight into what we found out. I'm not really going to cover gaming news and other stuff today because, and this may be kind of a short one compared to some others. So we found out today, it was announced that Ubisoft, and specifically Massive, is working on a new Star Wars IP. The only details we have right now is that it's going to be a single player open world experience. We do know that Julian Garrity is heading up the development of the game. And from my Twitter today, I assume basically all of the Division devs who I follow are working on the game. So, mixed feelings, right? I like Star Wars. I'm not like a hyper fan. Honestly, the Star Wars I've probably enjoyed more than anything has been The Mandalorian, especially season 2. That's led me to get way more involved in reading about the lore and the world. I've seen the 9 movies. I played a lot of the games, especially as a kid. For whatever reason, I can't really remember why, but like in the late 80s and 90s, there was like a bunch of like NES games and like old school games with Star Wars. I can't even remember if it's like Empire Strikes Back or something. There was a side scroller game that was just so dope. It was so cool on one of the systems. I genuinely cannot remember what it was. So like, I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm obviously a massive fan, notably for Division. But something I've talked about on my stream a few times is how I think I've played every game that Massive has ever put out, and that includes the older games, World and Conflict and stuff, before I even knew who they were. Like, you know, when I was a kid, I didn't care who the developer was of the games I played. A game came out, I put it on my computer, I played it, and then I didn't anymore. I didn't realize who made these games. And so I've been a Massive fan for a long time. So I like Star Wars. I love Massive. Seems like a good combination, right? And I'm sure it will be. But there's still like a feeling of like an end of an era kind of thing. I don't think Division is done as a franchise. If anything, I've said it before that it may just be getting started. They didn't really push Assassin's Creed until like the 3rd game, and that's when they really started to push it, and they put out a lot more games and spin-offs and so on. I still think Division has that energy. I still think Division has that potential. But yeah, well, let's kind of break it down. So what do I think this means for Division 2? So the recent updates and status of Division 2 has been a canceled limited time event that has turned into an apparel event, and basically zero inclination or insight into what's coming after season 4. We've talked about the season 4 spoilers. I have before in spoilers podcast, so I won't go into details necessarily right now. But in my opinion, the way that season 4 supposedly ends is the only way to really go on from there is with a whole new game. I've seen people, and then people have kind of snapped back at me and said that, oh, I think there's going to be a season 3 and 4 or a 5 and 6, 7, whatever. Or I think there's another Warlords of New York DLC coming. Some big DLC that, devs would have had to have been working on for the last year. And there's probably not. The only thing I can reasonably guess may come is more seasons. But I'm not even confident that if they do more seasons, they're going to be as quote unquote feature rich as the first 4. And some people are going to snort and laugh at that, because one of the big complaints about the 4 seasons has been, especially the first 2, from a lore perspective, but really all of them are just rehashing content. Like, there's some new guns, some new brands, new exotics. Like, that's cool. But at the end of the day, the final mission of each one has really been the only thing that adds quote unquote like new content. And even that's been, arguable about whether people are satisfied with it or not. So like the idea that people have, like, there's this just like weird thinking that I've seen people have where they just have this idea that like, oh no, they're secretly developing this giant DLC, and they're gonna do a year 3, and I bet they do a year 4. I bet they don't. I bet they don't. I am borderline willing to guarantee there's not some big DLC coming, another Warlords of New York or something like that. I'm willing to basically stake my podcast and my entire reputation on that. Seasons, maybe a year 3, maybe, but if my best case scenario for year 3 realistically is that it's just some more seasons. And does anyone really want that? I mean, obviously there's the side of me that will just be happy with any new content, especially anything that pushes the narrative forward and keeps the game alive. But like, does anyone really want to do some more, leagues and some more bounties and some more control points? I mean, I love this game and I'm a huge fan and I plan on continuing to play it. But if all it's going to be for the next 2, 3, 4 plus years is going to be Division 2 control points and bounties, like, you can count me out. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for, it's other than Warlords of New York. I say this lovingly, but the post-release content for this game has been mediocre. I really like the missions they put out. So year 1, I thought those missions are great. I thought Warlords was great. But when you talk about like all of the extra stuff, you're talking about a lot of like borderline cold end content. And it's been whittling away, it's slowly been less and less. And so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are going to have a year 3 and a year 4 of Division 2. And anyone who wants to can say, yeah, you idiot, you don't know anything. You act like you know everything. You obviously don't. That's fine. But if that year 3 and 4 consist of every 4 weeks me doing a new bounty and, save your pats on your own back, like, that's not impressive. And that's not what I'm here for. That this franchise deserves more than that. So for Division 2, what do I think this means? Division 2 may straggle on for another couple more years. Maybe. I mean, the other thing is there's a possibility that, like I've been predicting for a while, that season 4 is it. And the big turn right now is that there's no mystery about what this unannounced project is with Division, with Massive. I've been speculating heavily for a while that it was Division 3. I mean, it seemed obvious. And now I'm wrong. That is not true. Is that unannounced project is not Division 3. Let's talk about Division 3. What does this mean for Division 3? I think the most likely scenario is that it's on hiatus. The thing to consider is that this Star Wars game is being billed as a single player open world experience, not multiplayer, not a games as a service, not an ongoing multiplayer MMO experience. And so if you think about it, with a game like Fallen Order, for example, they made that game, they finished it, they put it out, they fixed it up, and then they were done. They moved on to their new project. So what seems likely to me is that Division as a mainline franchise is going to be put on the shelf. They're going to do this Star Wars game. They're hiring heavily for it right now. There were 15 or 16 listings last time I looked. And now looking back, the action adventure listing that I originally saw makes sense. So that's seems like it's going to be a single player action adventure open world game. Dope. And then when they finish with the Star Wars IP, then I bet they develop another Division game, mainline, continue the story. That is fine, right? These devs have been working on this franchise for 10-ish years now, some of them. Just the simple fact of working that long on one thing would be exhausting for anyone. Not to mention the demands of game development, not to mention the interaction with community, however unfortunate that may be at times. I suspect that in a very large part, almost everyone who has ever touched the Division from a development point of view is tired of it. Whether it's the way that things come off sometimes on State of the Game, whether it's the interactions with devs and the community or the lack thereof, whether it's the events of the last year, especially not only a pandemic, but political strife in the country that the game is set in, and some really disturbing similarities and comparisons that you can make. Well, obviously the game is much more dramatized and not exactly what we're living. There's some weird parallels, right? So the burnout from the dev side of this game must be real. And honestly, I have to say, from a totally honest point of view, from the player side, it's real. I didn't want to play this game for a few weeks because of the virus and because of what's happening politically in the United States right now. It feels weird to turn that game on and play it and enjoy it. I do, and I have, but it's, so I get it. So what I think is happening when it comes to a Division 3 is a hiatus. Worst case scenario, in my opinion, and I know some people are going to disagree here, but I just think you're wrong, is them moving the franchise to another studio to continue it while Massive takes on these two literally gigantic IPs in Avatar and Star Wars. I mean, if anything, this should show the confidence that Ubisoft has in Massive at this point, despite all the people that moan and groan about Division 1 and 2 or whatever. Ubisoft is entrusting this studio with a long-term game deal, I assume, or at least a games as a service deal with Avatar, with James Cameron Studio, which is no joke. That I'm sure that contract is ridiculous. On top of that, now they're entrusting them with a Star Wars IP. Like, that's Disney money. That's Disney contracts. they aren't giving that to their worst studio and just seeing how it goes. They're giving it to their best studio and seeing how it goes. And if you want to argue about which studio is the best in Ubisoft and whether or not it's like, the ones who work on Rainbow Six or Assassin's Creed or whatever, that's fine. But those studios aren't working on this game, and Massive is. And if you think that they're going to give a Disney license, a Star Wars license specifically, to just whatever studio can take it right now, you're out of your goddamn mind. I wouldn't be surprised if they started Division 3, but then this came along at some point and they stopped and are working on this instead. So I would be very, very unsurprised if there's already the beginnings of a Division 3 sitting around somewhere. But yeah, so moving to another studio, I think, would be a nightmare. As much as I've seen people be like, "Oh, I wish Division was made by an actual good studio." Like, it's such a stupid take, but I've heard it. And are you telling me that, do you think Ghost Recon is better off in Ubi Paris's hands than Red Storm? If you look at the entirety of the Rainbow Six and the Ghost Recon franchise, and you see even Siege in a way, like, I understand it's a highly competitive, very popular game, but that game from what it was to what it is now has been ruined. It's not the game it used to be. So if you really think that the IP of Ghost Recon and even Rainbow Six, from a what it used to be point of view, is better off in other studios' hands, I would highly disagree, and I believe it's the same for Massive and Division. Now, there have been rumors, and I've talked about this before, that Red Storm seems to be doing something Division related. They kind of inexplicably changed their little Twitter header back to Division. Some of the devs have started to kind of be back around somewhat unexpectedly. I've heard rumors at times that they are working on some type of spin-off game, whether it's I don't have any, that's literally all I've heard. So my best guess would be some type of like battle royale, like a free-to-play game of some type, maybe some kind of take on survival that so many people have been waiting for. That's like just a guess and some heavy speculation, maybe with a little bit of education, but that would actually make sense though if you think about it. So say that later this year a game releases, say in the winter or fall time, a game comes that's this some type of spin-off, free to play, BR kind of experience where you play, you do a thing, it's over, kind of like survival, and they build on that for a couple years, and then that would actually set it up where Massive could complete the Star Wars game, complete Avatar, at least the beginning stages of it, and then maybe go back to a mainline Division game and continue the story from there. I mean, that's basically purely me as a fan hoping for that, because I don't want this ride to be over, right? So I don't know. That's what I think, but we don't know. The last thing I'll say when it comes to this is they need to set some very clear expectations. This is a thing that they are god awful at. They are, in the 5 whatever years now I've been involved in this community, they are god awful about setting appropriate expectations and being transparent about what's going on. Now that's led to a bunch of moments of like, whoa, look at this dope thing we're doing, this is so cool, and like, that's cool, but it's also led to a lot of disappointment and a lot of speculation and a lot of people hoping and wishing for things that were just never to be. And we don't need that, especially now, because the writing's kind of on the wall in a way, right? So what I'm really hoping is that the next day of the game, realistically, we aren't going to find anything out until season 4 is essentially over. So not for like another month and plus a week or two, when the final target is released in the Manhunt, which allows people to do the final mission against Faye. I suspect the state of the game after that is when hopefully they give us some inclination to what's going on. But really, from a fan's point of view, I can't believe there wasn't a state of the game today. And maybe the timing of it didn't work. But I would say that if they really want to please, or at least give something to the people who are still around and who were wishing for a Division 3, who were wanting a year 3 or more seasons or spinoff or whatever, is that even just next Wednesday, there's a state of the game and they say, hey, we know you've heard the news about Star Wars. We're super excited, because more than likely Hamish and these guys are going to go to that team, to that project. People need to realize that, the Hamish and Yannick aren't just going to keep doing Division stuff when they, that's not even one of the main IPs being worked on anymore. So what would be nice is if, next week, or at least right after season 4 essentially ends, they sit down and they say, okay, this is what's going on. Season 4 is now ended. That is the bulk of the content. We will continue to support the game. The servers will be up. We'll rerun global events, and maybe there'll be some apparel events rerunning and things like that. But that's it for now. There is no year 3. We are not planning that currently, or they are. Yes, we are planning a year 3 of content. It needs to be very clear what is and isn't happening. I wish I had faith that that's going to happen in any reasonable amount of time. I'm hopefully being proven wrong. What does this mean for the EchoCast? I've at times tried to make this podcast into more of like a general gaming podcast, and I've enjoyed that. But the basis of this podcast is the Division. And obviously, if there's no more Division or nothing happening anytime soon, at the very least, it'll be shelved. I will, if we find out season 4 is the end of the Division 2, and if there is no spinoff that comes out or news of that comes, I mean, you'll probably not see any EchoCast for a while. If we're looking at a potential where there may not be a Division 3 until 2025 or later, maybe I don't even know. I'm 32. I would be, past, I'd be 35, 36 years old by the time that would be a thing. I have no idea. My, baby Diesel would be, almost, getting into school. So I'm not going to try to predict what will or won't happen with that. I would hope that I would restart things and be back. And I don't plan on leaving Twitter. I plan on continuing to stream. If anything, honestly, if the EchoCast ends and Division, for all intents and purposes, seems to be ending, I honestly think I would probably go more to just streaming a lot more and streaming more games and doing different things. So what it means for the EchoCast, if season 4 is it probably means a hiatus for the EchoCast until there's something to EchoCast about. What it means for my other content, I mean, I'm sure, like I said, I'd keep streaming. I would, still be, giving hot takes on Twitter and things like that. But it's probably not good news for the EchoCast if that's what's happening. I don't know. I'm hoping that I'm really excited for the devs. I really truly am. And for Ubisoft and for Massive, I don't really give a shit about Ubisoft, but for Massive and the devs, I'm super excited. For the people who love Star Wars that I've been seeing today, super pumped for them. I just don't care. Like I like Star Wars. I hope I'm sure I'll play this game, whatever it ends up being. I've been excited about the Avatar game. But it's not Division, right? So I hope that there can be an understanding of like, I'm happy for the people excited for this. I'm happy for Massive. I'm happy for the devs. I'm sad for Division, and I'm sad for the people who really like the game and were really hoping that there was more coming soon. And that doesn't seem like it's in the cards. There will not be a Division 3 in 2022. Probably not in 23 or 24 or 25. And that's a thing that I've already gotten some pushback on people from like Reddit and stuff being like, well, we didn't know Warlords of New York was coming. It's like, Not everyone did. And there was at least some indication that something was happening. And we weren't under the impression that, because they weren't at the time, that half of the studio was probably working on a Star Wars IP. Like, the last, 2019 was a different situation for Massive, where they kind of could secretly develop a cool little IP or a cool little DLC. That hasn't been the case. They couldn't even do a Nightmare event. They couldn't even finish a limited time event. That was probably not that big of a thing. It was probably just some kind of reincarnation of Kinley. So if they don't have the resources to finish that, what makes they aren't just secretly working on some giant DLC that's like the entire state of Ohio or something? Like, the numbers just don't make sense. If there's a year 3, it's probably just going to be more seasons, and that's not enough. At least I don't think it's enough for most players. But I digress. Well, that's out now, so we'll see how it goes from there. I do have one listener question from Zeka on Twitter saying, I guess I know your take on this, but I'm asking anyways. Do you think that they should ditch PvP altogether and focus on PvE for a potential Division 3 and maybe have a standalone PvP game? Also, Baby Diesel, is she commenting on TD3? She's been great when she was on the podcast. If you haven't listened for that long, a while back, I would record episodes of the EchoCast while babysitting her. So you would occasionally hear her yipping and yelling in the background while I was doing the podcast. So that's what that's all about. So considering the news of today, I don't know. I think PvP has been a big drag on Division since its inception for 1 and 2. I think that when they had Red Storm working on it kind of independently, that was better, but I think that there was probably issues with communication and cooperation there. And then we've seen now in Division 2 that without Red Storm involved, that it's essentially been ignored. So one day when there's a Division 3, it wouldn't surprise me at all if at the very least the PvP is handled much differently. If these rumors and my speculation that Red Storm might be working on some type of side project or something are true, I have to imagine it would be PvP focused. And one day, if they do a Division 3, I would wonder if they would maybe do a kind of like a Warzone thing where like they're essentially 2 different games, but they package them so they can be handled like that. I don't know. We'll see. I personally would be fine with that. I would love to see them make a Division 3 just be kind of what they're describing this Star Wars game as, a open world, single player, in-depth experience that doesn't necessarily have to have MMO aspects or even RPG aspects, and definitely not games as a service aspects. Thank you for the question, Zeka. That's the podcast. That's the tweet. That's it for this week. It'll be fine. At the very least, we've gotten to have a really awesome run with Division 1 and 2. I'll keep doing podcasts until we get some kind of definitive information, but that definitive information needs to happen. We, in the next month or 2, we need to know what is happening with Division for the next year, in my opinion. So hopefully they can fulfill that. I am Bon Diesel on Twitch, where I stream a few times a week. Check me out on there. You can check out my Twitter at Bon Diesel or at the EchoCast. If you want some cool EchoCast or Bon Diesel merch, please check out streamlabs.com/Bon Diesel. That's all I have. So until next time.